This is ILTV on the Hour, bringing you the biggest stories from Israel and the Middle East. It's currently 2 p.m. here in Tel Aviv and 7 a.m. in New York. I'm Shosh Bedrosian, and today is day 675 of the war in Gaza. Let's get into all the top headlines at this hour. Victory is not yet complete, and eliminating Hamas is a condition to end the war. That's a direct message from Prime Minister Netanyahu, who gave two press conferences less than 24 hours ago to journalists here locally in Israel and to the foreign media, first in English and later in Hebrew. Netanyahu reiterated Israel had no other choice than to approve these plans to go into Gaza City because Hamas won't give back the hostages or lay down its weapons, according to the Prime Minister. He also said going into Gaza City would be the best way to end the war and bring the hostages back, calling it one of Hamas's last stronghold cities inside of the enclave. Netanyahu said that the cabinet made a dramatic decision to defeat Hamas and instructed the IDF to shorten the timeline for taking over Gaza. He did not answer a question about a partial deal. Here is one of the things he had to say yesterday.
The timeline that we set for the action is fairly quickly. I mean, we want to, first of all, enable safe zones to be established, facilities to be brought to, so the civilian population in Gaza City can move out.
And the Prime Minister made it clear that there would be a clear plan for the approximately 1 million Palestinians who live in or around Gaza City to be evacuated from combat zones to safe zones, which he says will have ample food, medical access, and safety for Palestinians fleeing the area. He said Israel is working to increase aid distribution and a humanitarian surge and is inviting more countries to join efforts with the IDF, who is conducting these airdrops in addition and in cooperation with other countries. Here's what else Netanyahu had to say about the future of Gaza when saying Israel does not want to necessarily occupy Gaza, but rather free it from Hamas.
The war can end tomorrow if Gaza, or rather if Hamas lays down its arms and releases all the remaining hostages. Gaza will be demilitarized. Israel will have overriding security responsibility. A security zone will be established on Gaza's border with Israel to prevent future terrorist incursions. A civilian administration will be established in Gaza that will seek to live in peace with Israel.
And joining us now to discuss all of the developments at this point in time is Colonel retired Miri Eisen, a senior fellow at the International Institute for Counter-Terrorism. Thank you so much for being with us, Miri.
To be here. Good afternoon.
I first want to know what your take is on Sunday's press conference Netanyahu gave to foreign and Israeli press. What would you say the biggest takeaway is from it?
That he gave a clear vision, doesn't matter if you agree with it or not, both of what's happening now and of how he views, the government views, the day after. And Shosh, for the first time in 22 months, not just the amount of days, but months, Prime Minister stood clearly, not just in English to the world, but also in Hebrew to the Israeli public, and saying, this is what we want to achieve. Here are the different stages. Here's how we see the day after in the Gaza Strip. Here's what we will allow. Here's what we won't allow. That's very clear, and I don't think I've heard that in the last 22 months.
Why do you think it's taken so long for him to get to this point where he clearly outlined what will happen and what he wants to see happen? I thought it was very interesting, Miri, how he noted he wants some type of civilian forum or group to be formed inside of the Gaza Strip that would not pose a threat to Israel. Also talking about a large security perimeter and fence he wants to establish. Why now? Why almost 2 years after October 7th?
Shosh, this war in the beginning was one which at the end we always need to acknowledge this is a terrible war. Not only did we not ask for these horrible things, but it took us time, us as Israelis and the government and the military, to both understand, to respond. And there is no easy, nice war. So why is the Prime Minister now presenting both to the world and to Israel a clear vision? I'm going to say because only now have they actually put together that clear vision. I think that in the Israeli perspective, this war against Hamas terror organization in the Gaza Strip is directly connected to all of the other fronts. And I think for the prime minister, it was only after the Hezbollah front and the Iran front were seriously taken care of. That doesn't mean that they're over, but that they were seriously taken care of, that he could present what is for him a clear vision for what happens now in Gaza. I don't think that he could do that before politically, and I have to say even personally, because he was Mr. Security, and you couldn't give a response to what happens in the Gaza Strip if you didn't talk about both Hezbollah in Lebanon and let alone Iran, and those were also taken care of. So I think that that gives us the timing.
Right. So Netanyahu explained this would be the only way to end the war, going into Gaza City. I know he said something similar when Israel went into Rafah for the first time. Will Gaza City really be the last location until Hamas is defeated? What's your take on that?
So now let's do the separation between, as I said, a vision, which is a clear vision, that there are those who agree and disagree, and then we get to the what I'm going to call rhetoric, or the statements that are made. I will remind everybody that the Prime Minister has made many statements about total victory, and I want to take those terms apart. Militarily, we have not gone in a real operation into the heart of Gaza City. We have to differentiate, most people don't know to do so, between Gaza City and between the Gaza Strip. I mean, it's not that there's that much of a difference, but we have not gone into the heart of the city. We've gone in and out, we've done little operations, but we've never gone in and physically taken it all over throughout these 22 months. That is a physical military operation. It is not an easy one, but in military terms, it's absolutely doable. So here, I think that that was clear. He also answered the question and said it would be quick. Militarily, that's not a problem. What it does is it puts the IDF in the heart of what are still a million people. We haven't done that until now. We haven't been sitting in the middle of the people. It's still an urban area. Yes, there's a lot of destruction, but that destruction is still of buildings that are upright, many of them still occupied, even if there's a lot of destruction. That is not an easy place to be in urban warfare for any kind of military force.
So I want to ask you, because just a few weeks ago, there was a very, what we thought a large military announcement about the IDF beginning operations inside of Deir al-Balah, which at that point, the IDF says was also a Hamas stronghold. Why wouldn't a full operation now happen in the urban part of Deir al-Balah? We know that operations are happening on the outskirts of the southern district of that city, but why not go directly into it as well, similar to what is being approved for this plan in Gaza City?
I think at the end, that's the subject that you and I both have not touched upon at all until now, and it's called hostages. Where are the hostages held? How are they being held? The 20 alive, the 30 bodies. And you don't want, you, Israel, to be clearly and directly responsible for hostages' death. By the way, for everybody to be clear, Hamas, the terror organization, is going to blame us for their death no matter what. I'm not putting that aside. I want to say that clearly. Hamas is going to blame us. But the IDF, as a military operation, wants to be sure that if they are near them, that we don't inadvertently do so. It's going to be both at the heart of the Gaza City and in Deir al-Balah. In both of them, those are always going to be limitations. They will continue to be limitations. Even now, it's not that the IDF is going in and saying, it doesn't matter, hostages, we're going to do whatever it takes to conquer and occupy those areas. We're still doing that within the limitations of trying both, I want to be clear also, to not kill civilians or what we call non-combatants. We're not going in now to kill everybody. We're going in to destroy Hamas's capability, to destroy their military capability, to try to get to the hostages, to get those hostages out. None of that is easy. And that's why when you ask, why not all of it? Because every single stage is difficult. By the way, the fact that we've only said Gaza City doesn't mean we won't do Deir al-Balah. The military at the end can take decisions and do what they need to do.
Right. You mentioned, of course, the hostages, which we will get to in a moment. Joining us now on this panel is actually Ambassador Alan Baker, the director of the Institute for Contemporary Affairs at the Jerusalem Center, and head of the Global Law Forum. He also served as Israel's ambassador to Canada. Thanks so much for being with us, Alan.
I see.
So,
so we'll do this, and
I first want to discuss. It seems like we're having one technical difficulty. I think we will ask Miri this question. Let's specifically talk about this plan. Let's say approximately 800,000 people to 1 million people evacuate Gaza City. Won't Hamas fighters just leave with the civilian population? How will this military plan actually work in terms of fighting inside of the city?
In October of 2023, which is already almost 22 months ago, when Israel, the IDF, initiated its ground plan after the Hamas terror attack of October 7th, that was an assault, an attack, we already then told the million people in the northern Gaza Strip, which includes Gaza City, to go south, meaning we've already done that. And yes, some of the military terror combatants went down south, but what's there is underground, are these underground subterranean arena. And that is only for the military combatants, for those terror combatants, and they use it extensively. And they use that for mobility, for defense, to keep the hostages there. And that has not been destroyed under Gaza City. You have to be there physically to be able to destroy it. So yes, I absolutely think that some will go south, but they're not just hiding within the civilian population. They also want to attack against the Israeli forces. The Hamas terror organization would love to come and combat against Israeli forces and to be successful. For them, that shows that they're doing what they call themselves. Again, I'll remind everybody, they call themselves resistance. They don't call themselves terror. These are men, almost entirely, who dress in civilian clothes and attack any kind of target and murder women and children and burn them. That's the terror military combatants. So in that sense, I'm not worried about their moving south. I don't think that it is an easy situation, but we don't want the 800,000 to 1 million people be there. That's at the end. We're not there. We're not out to erase the Palestinians. We're not there to erase 1 million people. We didn't do that immediately after the attack in October 2023. It's not what we're doing now. And yes, it's a harsh war, but get them out of those areas. You're saving lives. Right. And if that is the code for some of those Hamas terrorists, that's part of the price, but there is no easier way to do so.
Right. And of course, leaving places like Gaza City, you go down south, of course, there's areas where there's pretty much no buildings standing. Netanyahu actually commented on that yesterday, saying that when Hamas leaves these areas, they booby-trap nearly all of the buildings with the idea of having to go in and try to find where these explosives are, which unfortunately has led to the deaths of several IDF soldiers and many injuries. We're going to try to invite on Alan again. Let's see if he can hear us to our panel. Alan?
Yes.
Amazing. Thanks so much for being with us. Appreciate your time. I want to speak about the hostages that these families are deeply worried about that could be in cities like Gaza City if this military operation does go in officially. It seems as if they will very soon. What is your message just specifically about the hostage families? They are deeply worried. How does the IDF maneuver a situation like this? I think we're having tech issues again. Miri, we're going to have to stick with you. Appreciate you staying with us. Why don't you take that question? Let's talk about the hostages, specifically the families who are working so hard to make sure their loved ones are staying in the spotlight and they're not forgotten in the depths of this expansion. How can the IDF protect these hostages, especially when they're in the depths of these tunnels so far underground?
Let's be clear, and I'm going to be very matter of fact because my heart is with the hostages, with their families, with everybody who knows them. You know what? Shosh and me, we've all lived with these hostages and their families for the last 22 months. It's part of all of us and probably for a lot of the viewers as well. Militarily, and I'm breathing in deep because I'm being matter of fact, you try to make sure that you don't directly attack a site where the hostages would be. You try very much not to create the situation that those that are holding the hostages will feel so threatened that they would do the worst of all, which is what happened to the group of 6 hostages, including Hirsch, Paul, and Goldberg, but that most people know of, when in August of 2024, rather than have Israeli soldiers get to the hostages, they executed them. So what I'm talking about is the understanding of where they are, of acting carefully in those areas, but that still means that you can act in the areas, because hostages for Hamas are Hamas's strategic asset. They want the hostages, and they love the fact, and I'm being slightly cynical on TV, which never works, Shosh, because for the Hamas, Israel, Jews, human beings being torn apart by the plight of the hostages, the fact that it has become a divisive issue, for Hamas, that's a win. They want to continue to divide us. So the military in that sense want to be sure that they're not the ones who accidentally would kill or bring about their killing by Hamas. There's still a lot of leeway of what you can do inside the Gaza Strip when it comes to actions, to uncovering, to what you talked about before, the booby-trapped arena, and enacting in that underground subterranean arena. As I say from I think it's probably a U.S. song, inch by inch, mile by mile. You do it slowly, carefully, and surely to destroy the Hamas's capabilities without hurting the hostages.
Yeah, you mentioned there that we are about to commemorate, unfortunately, the 1 year of when 6 hostages were executed in captivity, with their families, using that as an example in this case. Look what happens when there's IDF operations close. Hersh Goldberg, Poland was part of that, in addition to Ori Danino and several others whose stories have touched millions of people around the globe of what they were like in captivity, but also their families who have continued to be light for these souls that are still in the depths of captivity at this point in time. Now, the Prime Minister's office confirmed Netanyahu actually had a conversation with Trump yesterday regarding his intention to end the war and get the hostages back by expanding it into Gaza City. Is it likely Trump is supportive of this idea, even though he hasn't come out and said it explicitly?
I think the President of the United States, Shosh, has the clearest voice of anybody, meaning at any stage he may come out, Truth Social, and say something about it. He is not until now. Having said that, this president, like President Biden, by the way, but President Trump, has met the hostage families. He met Idan Alexander, who was let out afterwards, who's also a dual U.S. citizen. He has been directly involved. He has heard directly from hostages that have been brought back to Israel. He's met them personally, so I think he is very much on board. Being on board doesn't mean that he agrees with everything that Prime Minister Netanyahu said in the clear vision of yesterday. I do think that the Israeli Prime Minister very much views this administration under President Trump as being very supportive of whatever line we're going at, meaning we may not be aligned right now with the U.S. people, yes or no. We could ask about the, pushback within Israeli population. But when it comes to the U.S. administration under President Trump and to the Israeli government under Prime Minister Netanyahu, I think that they are very close in thought, even if sometimes the rhetoric comes out differently, both on the day after, on going in, on continuing the military pressure, that at the end, if you don't continue the military pressure, and I say that because a lot of people ask about that, then that's a win for Hamas. If you stop the military pressure, that's a win for Hamas. So it's very difficult to understand what is better, to do it or not to do it.
Miri, thank you so much for being with us, as always, as all of us continue to follow all the developments that come out here in Israel. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And the IDF says they conducted airstrikes in Gaza City overnight that killed an Al Jazeera journalist who they say was head of a terrorist cell in Hamas and was responsible for advancing rocket attacks against Israeli civilians and soldiers. The military says they disclosed intelligence and other documents that confirm Anas alShariff was involved in terrorist activities, which includes documents with personnel rosters, lists of terrorist training course, and other directories. Al Jazeera has denied alShariff's ties with the terror group, but he was actually posting on X leading up to his death, where he described ongoing strikes inside of Gaza City for about 2 hours. This is a video that is reportedly of him with Hamas terrorists right behind him. This was in the wintertime, with civilians actually located in those buildings surrounding this location. But we, of course, are learning more details at this point in time. We know a few other journalists, reported journalists, were actually killed in that tent where he was located and targeted as well. And at the United Nations Security Council, Israel and the Palestinians clashed over the future of Gaza, offering two starkly different visions at an emergency session called to address Israel's plan to expand its military operations. Now, the Security Council chamber in New York became the stage for two competing narratives on Sunday, one portraying Israel as an occupying aggressor, the other as a nation fighting to free Gaza from terror. The meeting was convened by France, Denmark, Greece, and Slovenia after Israel's security cabinet approved to push to gain military control over the entire Gaza Strip following civilian evacuations from combat zones. Now, from the Israeli side, Deputy Permanent Representative Jonathan Miller said the plan is not about occupation, but liberation. Miller outlined Israel's 5 principles to end the war: 1, disarming Hamas; 2, returning all of the hostages; 3, demilitarizing Gaza; 4, maintaining Israeli security control; and 5, installing a peaceful civilian administration, neither Hamas nor the Palestinian Authority. Now, the Palestinian ambassador claimed Israel's true goal is to not defeat Hamas, but to tighten its grip on Gaza and derail any chance of any independent Palestinian state. The United States pushed back, saying such criticism plays into Hamas's hands. Washington warned that by spreading falsehoods and condemning Israel, the Council risked the prolonging the war and the rewarding the terror group responsible for what happened on October 7th. As Israel prepares for its next move, the divide in New York underscores a broader global split over how to end the war and who should shape Gaza's future. And we're also specifically hearing what happened inside of that meeting. Let's take a listen to what they had to say. Looks like we do not have the soundbite from the United Nations. I think we're working to get it. Let's take a listen now.
Israel is seeking to cement its full military control over the Gaza Strip and is prolonging this war not to end Hamas rule or to disarm it, but to prevent independent Palestinian statehood.
This is not conquest. Israel has no plans or desire to permanently occupy Gaza. This is liberation from a brutal terror regime.
The most recent round of negotiations collapsed because Hamas drew encouragement from efforts to target Israel with libels and lies. Hamas refuses to accept a ceasefire and continues to torture the hostages.
And also, Australia has become the latest Western democracy to announce plans to recognize a Palestinian state. The Prime Minister announced that they will recognize it at the 80th session of the UN General Assembly next month in New York. Australia is now following the lead of France, Canada, and the UK, which made similar announcements. Israel has condemned the decision, saying it will reward Hamas and a reward for terror. Following the Australian announcement, New Zealand indicated that it may also follow suit. The Prime Minister making the announcement at a press conference. Take a listen.
Today I can confirm that at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in September, Australia will recognise the state of Palestine. Australia will recognise the right of the Palestinian people to a state of their own, predicated on the commitments Australia has received from the Palestinian Authority. We will work with the international community to make this right a reality.
And this week marks 20 years since Israel's historic and controversial disengagement from the Gaza Strip, a government-led operation that forcibly evacuated more than 8,000 Israeli settlers from Gush Katif and other communities inside of Gaza. The goal was to advance diplomatic efforts towards peace. August 15th, 2005, the final day of evacuations, remains etched in the memory of many Israelis as families watched their homes demolished and their lives uprooted. Just a year later, Hamas won legislative elections in Gaza, and by 2007, Hamas violently seized the full control of the enclave. Today, we're taking a look back at the disengagement and its lasting impact. Take a listen.
It's the piece in me that was left in Gaza in 2005.
On the border of Israel and Egypt, in a small community called Shlomit, sits a beautiful home surrounded by tranquility and family and the echoes of a life once lived just 10 kilometers away, inside the Gaza Strip, where Yedidia Harush once called home.
This was my house before we built it, and this is Rafah.
These are his childhood memories. Memories that stayed trapped in a place that no longer has a lifeline for Israelis.
It's crazy.
Harush managed to capture all of these moments before his family and thousands of other Israelis were forced out of what was known as Gush Katif by the Israeli government. The controversial decision was a government attempt at making peace with the Palestinians as terror attacks in the Strip continued to grow.
When I left Gaza, I was a 17-year-old, heartbroken. We thought we're going to close our eyes and the issue is going to be solved. Then I said, if the disengagement plan happens, we are the wall of Beersheba and Ashkelon and Ashdod, and if we run away from the terror will chase us. This was accurate.
2 years after the disengagement, Hamas took full control of the Gaza Strip. The sliver of peace Israelis once called home was now part of the terror group's territory.
Gush Katif was the finger in the dab of terrorism, and once you take out Gush Katif, we'll get waves of terrorism, not only from the Gaza, but from the entire world.
Former residents have worked hard to keep their history alive. Located at the Gush Katif Heritage Center in Eisen, you'll find evidence of Jewish life that was in Gaza thousands of years ago, to the moments they preserved before they were forced out.
We look at this as an integral part of our story as the Jewish people. It has to be told, not to be forgotten, because this place, Gush Katif, was like a bunch of sand dunes, and all the dreams that were, being able to be accomplished were accomplished there.
Dozens of people who once grew up in the Gaza Strip went back for the very first time since the disengagement after October 7th, but this time as soldiers.
I'm an officer in the intelligence brigade in Israel, so our brigade was also fighting in Gush Katif. So we were fighting around Khan Yunis, and I felt very anxious when our troops came into the places where our former communities were.
Harush also returned back to Gaza as a soldier, as his childhood memories transformed into adult ones.
To stand on the same land, to see the synagogue that was left, to see the basketball gym that I played in, was a very complicated feeling. On one hand, I was very excited, was very emotional, but on the other hand, I was like, we told you we'll have to come here.
If you asked former Gush Katif residents if they would live in Gaza again one day, you'll get mixed responses. For Harush, he's decided to focus his energy on developing his small community the same way his parents did in Gaza.
We're one nation, we're committed to each other, and we're in one boat. It doesn't matter what one does, we have to cover for each other. When I came here, I realized why people love it here so much. It reminded me the same spirit that we had in Gaza, in Gush Katif. I was like, wow, we're starting something out of scratch.
We are committed to telling the stories of so many different communities here in Israel. That's just one example of our work, capturing and listening to the voices of people who lived in Gush Katif since they were children and they were forced out as young adults. Those are just some of their voices. Of course, here at ILTV, we're also following all of the developing news, specifically about the divide Israeli society feels right now over Netanyahu's security cabinet decision to take over Gaza City, expanding the military operations happening inside of the Gaza Strip. They're torn completely with one side of the aisle, saying they're frustrated that the government did not decide to take over the entire Gaza Strip, and the other side absolutely heartbroken and infuriated that the expansion could lead to where some of these hostages are currently being held at this point in time, with the families of hostages completely upset, up in arms. They're actually planning on hosting a nationwide protest on Sunday in spite of what this decision is to go back into Gaza and expand it even more from what it is right now. They're calling on everyone to participate nationwide so they can hear everyone's voices that is not agreeing with this plan to move forward. But Netanyahu said in a press conference yesterday, this is nearly the only option forward to defeat Hamas. He says Hamas left them barely no chance to end this war. This is the only option going forward. That's a wrap here on ILTV on the Hour. Thanks so much for being with us today.